Not as delicious as yours, Lisa, whatever it is.
Actually, when my dad was alive, he was on dialysis, so it couldn't make it the way that my mom used to make it. I had to use balsamic vinegar and honey. He could have those.
Fabulous.
And yeah, so I've still been doing that, but then I do other stuff on top of that. But it really makes a nice start for it.
I bet it does. That sounds fabulous.
It does.
I'm making breast of veal this year. I'm not making brisket.
Oh, I haven't had that in such a long time.
I know, I saw it on Facebook. I saw a recipe. I said, I haven't had it in so long.
Sorry, everyone. We're going to get started with our service tonight, but we will continue the Passover recipe swap afterward. We're just getting our opening song up and ready to go. And while we're waiting, why don't we all take a deep breath, get centered for Shabbat. I can speak for myself when I have not taken the time to breathe deeply this week, but Shabbat has arrived, so we have the chance.
Shalom Aleichem Malchei Hasharet Malchei Elyon Melech Malchei Hamlachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu Boachem L'Shalom Malchei Hashalom Malchei Elyon Melech Malchei Hamlachim Kadosh Baruch Hu Baruchuni L'Shalom Malchei Hashalom Malchei Elyon Mi Melech Malchei Hamlachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu Seitchem L'Shalom Malchei Hashalom Malchei Elyon Melech Malchei Hamlachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu.
Welcome to everyone who is with us by Zoom and by YouTube. If you need any tech support tonight, feel free to message Mira Brzozowski, our executive director, who is with us to help anyone who needs. And you are all in for a treat, as tonight we have our second learner service of this year, and we're going to do a deep dive into the meaning of our core prayers in the Shabbat service. But before we jump to learning about our liturgy, we're celebrating William Frohl, who will be called to the Torah tomorrow morning as one of Beth Chaim's B'nai Mitzvah. It is my pleasure to invite William and his family to lead us in candlelighting in Kiddush.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu l'adlik ner shel Shabbat.
Amen. And we'll hear a reading from your dad.
O source of light and truth, creator of the eternal law of goodness, help us to find knowledge by which to live. Lead us to take the words we shall speak into our hearts and our lives. Bless all who enter the sanctuary in need, all who bring the offerings of their hearts. May our worship lead us to acts of kindness, peace, and love.
Thank you, Jeff. We'll now all raise our Kiddush cups high, the symbol of our joy. William, take it away.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei pri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam Asher Kidishanu b'mitzotav, Ratzavanu, B'Shabbat Kocha, B'va Uvertzon, Hinchilanu, Tigaron L'Maseh V'Reshi, Kiyom Kihila L'Mikra Kodesh, Zeher L'Tziyat Mitraim, Kivanu V'Charta, Lotanu Kidashta, Mikol Ha'amim, B'Shabbat Kocheha, B'Ava Uvertzon, Hinchatanu, Baruch Atah Adonai Mekadesh HaShabbat.
Amen. L'chaim. And we'll hear one final reading from your mom, Pamela.
I begin with a prayer of gratitude for all that is holy in my life. God needs no words, no English or Hebrew, no semantics, and no services, but I need them. Through prayer, I can sense my inner strength, my inner purpose, my inner joy, my capacity to love. As I reach upward in prayer, I sense these qualities in my Creator. To love God is to love each other. To work to make our lives better. To love God is to love the world God created and to work to perfect it. To love God is to love dreams of peace and joy that illumine all of us and to bring that vision to life.
Thank you so much. I hope everyone will join me in the chat box with hearty mazel tovs and congratulations. We're so excited to celebrate you in the sanctuary tomorrow morning. All right, now that we have officially welcomed in Shabbat, let's talk about one of the key prayers in our Shabbat service, one that only appears on Friday nights. All right, so Mira, maybe spotlight me. Let's try that. Oh, fantastic. Okay, great. All right, so Lecha Dodi, regularly a crowd favorite, was written in a very particular way. The art of the acrostic is very popular in Jewish tradition. We see it several times in the book of Psalms in our Bible, and definitely throughout our prayer book. And this prayer is no exception, only instead of an alphabet acrostic where you start with the first letter of the alphabet and work your way through, and each letter spells out a new line. We here have the author's signature within the prayer. So what I highlighted for you, Cantor, if you'll just hit the next slide. Oh, there it is. So the author's name is Shlomo Halevi Alkabetz. This was a rabbi who lived in the 16th century, and he actually built the stanzas using his own name. And so it's, a particular brand of modesty to use your own name in a prayer. But clearly this poem was so popular that we're continuing to sing it centuries later. Shlomo Halevi Alkabetz was originally from Salonika, which at the time was in the Ottoman Empire. He was a Sephardic Jew. Okay. Sorry, we have a special visitor right before bedtime. And but he was inspired to move to the Holy Land and felt that he was actually guided by God's teaching in a dream. And so he moved to the north of Israel, to the holy city of Tzfat, which is where he composed most of his poetry. And like many of his neighbors in the land of, in the neighborhood of Tzfat, he was a Kabbalist, a Jewish mystic, and he was part of the community that would wear olive white, just like a bride would wear on her wedding day, and go run into the fields and greet the setting sun and face the east. Setting sun. That would be the west. That's the one. And watch the work week go by and sink into the horizon and welcome in the Sabbath bride. And so we'll now turn to these words of love and hope that with Shabbat we have a taste of the world to come, and we are so grateful that Shabbat has finally arrived.
La 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 lecha dodi, la 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 likrat kala, la 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 b'nei Shabbat lekabel, la 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 lecha dodi, la 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 likrat kala, la 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 b'nei Shabbat. Ya la 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 b'nei Shabbat, b'nei Shabbat nekabelam. Likrat Shabbat לכו ונרקם, כי מקור הברכה מראש מקדם נסוכה, סוף מעשה במחשבה תחילה. לקראת כלה, יא לה 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 בני שבת, בני שבת נקבלה. התעוררי, התעוררי, כי בעורך וביורי, אורי אורי כבוד אדוני עלייך נגלה. יללה לך דודי, יללה לקראת כלה, יללה בני שבת, בני שבת נקבלה. בואי ושלום עטרת בעלה, גם בשמחה וצונה, תוך אמונה עם סגולה. בואי חלה, בואי חלה, יללה לך דודי, יללה לקראת כלה, יללה בני שבת, בני שבת נקבל. יללה לך דודי, יללה לקראת כלה, יללה בני שבת, בני שבת נקבלה.
I invite our friends on Zoom to unmute themselves and greet each other. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat shalom, everybody.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
My name isn't showing. I'm here.
Hi.
I can hear your voice, iPad.
Yeah.
We can tell you're Alana.
Yeah.
Hi, Lana.
I love
Shabbat
it. The
shalom.
puppies are taking part.
I hear you.
I'm here. Yes. Can't see me.
No.
Eventually. Someday.
Oh, we know you're there.
Someday. Yeah, there's your name, Alana. Is it
Fixed
showing
it.
up? Oh,
Yeah, your
thank you.
name
Okay,
is.
thank you.
But not your
Fix
face.
it.
We'll continue with some words of teaching from Cantor Binder.
I don't know, wouldn't we rather have some words of prayer? No? We'd rather learn about the Baruch Hu than pray the Baruch Hu. Okay. Very good.
What
So,
prayer are we gonna do? Do we always do the same one, or is it different?
well, it's the same prayer. The Baruch Hu is popularly known as the call to worship, which has always seemed a little silly to me, as we're already all in the synagogue and we've already all been praying, right? Right? Well, I very often like to describe our Shabbat service, really any service, like a workout. Not that it's that strenuous to do, but it has a structure like a good workout. And if you if you run into the gym and just go for the weights right away and start pumping away, you're very likely going to hurt yourself. And likewise, if you run into the synagogue and just start praying with all your might right away, you're very likely going to hurt yourself. Proper prayer requires a little bit of a warm-up. And in the structure of the service, that's what we've been doing. These texts that we've been doing before the Baruch Hu were added to the service late in Jewish history. The Baruch Hu itself and many of the prayers that come after are much earlier. They're kind of like the original center of the service. So we're about to start really praying, and we begin with this call to worship. And I'll have more to say about this in a little bit. But one of the interesting things, if you think about when we're in the synagogue, I usually, well, you could look at it two ways. You could look at it as I turn my back on the congregation, but that's not actually what I'm doing. What I'm doing is turning to face the east, as is customary for, now, you all don't have to turn to face the east because in standing in the sanctuary, you already are facing the east. But I usually will turn and face east when I do Baruch Hu. This is the first time in the service where everybody is supposed to be facing to the east. And traditionally we bow when we do Baruch Hu. And, as Americans, we mostly don't know what that's about because in America we don't usually have the custom of bowing to a king. But everywhere else in the world that is used to having royalty around, they recognize this immediately, that when we say Baruch Hu, we bow toward the east, we bow in deference to the king of everything.
What comes next in our service is a series that is intentionally designed to go together. And there are slight variations, whether you're looking at a morning service or an evening service. This chunk of the service has slightly different liturgy given the time of day. The rabbis who crafted many of our prayers wanted to very much plug into not only the times of day, but the times of the year and the seasons. So maybe next Shabbat we'll play around with a few Passover tunes in our Shabbat service to whet your appetite for that holiday that's coming. But no matter what time of day it is, the first prayer in this series is on the topic of creation, and predominantly the very first thing that was created, which was light. And so in the morning, we want to look towards that light and express our gratitude. Without that light, none of us would be here. And then at night, we're, a little nervous that the light has gone. And especially in the ancient world, we had to figure out other ways to continue to see each other and to operate. Many times we would just go to bed, but we were very hopeful that light would come back again. And we wanted to say, please God, remember to bring it back. And also that we want to express gratitude for the rhythms in our life. So that's the Ma'ariv Aravim prayer in the evening, or Yotzer in the morning. And then after creation, we go to revelation, that we want to say thank you, God, for what the Jewish people feel is one of the greatest gifts of all time, our sacred teachings, what we call the Torah. But it doesn't have to just be that scroll that you see in the image, but it could also be the sum of all Jewish teaching, and so much that we've passed down from generation to the next. But originally, tradition tells us, we received at Mount Sinai. And so in the evening, we recite Ahavat Olam, and in the morning, Ahava Rabbah. And then the third in this series is a prayer for redemption. We are most familiar with the lines that we call Mi Chamocha, which was lifted right out of our Torah scroll, the song that we sang at the Sea of Reeds, but actually the prayer for redemption is much longer and really reminds us that God is looking out for us and that God is helping us to find ways to achieve self-fulfillment and freedom. And yes, absolutely in Jewish tradition, each category of prayer is rooted in a moment in history. But one of the things I love about Jewish tradition is while, yes, there was a moment according to the Torah where the world was created, but also these are ongoing processes. That it doesn't have to be a one and done activity, but we are always creating. And we're always revealing and uncovering God's teachings. And God willing, we're always redeeming one another or feeling that we're reaching that sense of salvation and freedom. And so, when we celebrate holidays like Shabbat, where we especially celebrate the creation of the world, or like Passover, where we're focused more heavily on the redemption, we tap into those historical moments, but then we're also reminded of how we partner with God to help ensure that these three activities continue to go on. And you can also look at these three phases as starting from the most universal aspect, that the whole world was created, and then God chose to reveal the Torah, the teaching, to the Jewish people and to redeem us. And so we are in this dialectic. We're both in relationship with everyone, with all of humanity, but also we understand our identity as something special and significant. And we vacillate in Jewish tradition between these two different outlooks. Tonight, our English readings are going to be close translations of the prayers that they are in place of. And so we're going to ask Ronnie Staffenberg to read the English translation of Ma'ariv Aravim, our evening prayer for creation.
Blessed are you, Adonai our God, ruler of the universe, who speaks the evening into being, skillfully opens the gates, thoughtfully alters the time and changes the seasons, and arranges the stars in their heavenly courses according to plan. You are creator of day and night, rolling light away from darkness and darkness from light, transforming day into night and distinguishing one from the other. Adonai Tzvaot is your name. Ever-living God, may you reign continually over us into eternity. Blessed are you, Adonai, who brings on evening. Baruch atah Adonai, Hama'ariv Aravim.
Thank you, Ronnie. And now we'll hear Ahavat Olam from Sherry Barsky.
Everlasting love you are for your people Israel, by teaching us Torah and mitzvot, laws and precepts. Therefore, Adonai our God, when we lie down and when we rise up, we will meditate on your laws and your commandments. We will rejoice in your Torah forever. Day and night will reflect on them, for they are our life, and doing them the length of our days. Never remove your love from us. Praise to you, Adonai, who loves your people Israel. Baruch atah Adonai, Ohev Amo Yisrael.
Thank you, Sherry.
All right. Now, I'm aware that I am committing a cardinal sin at Beth Chaim by providing you only the Hebrew text with no translation and no transliteration. And I want you to know that I'm doing it on purpose because you all know these words. This is from the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 6, and I will chant the first sentence for you just in case. It goes, Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Probably not so familiar with that melody. That's the trope right out of the Torah. But if I continue with verse number 5, Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavcha u'b'chol nafshecha u'b'chol me'odecha. I'm not going to go on, but I have the first few lines of Ve'ahavta here. So this is Shema and Ve'ahavta, quoted word for word right out of Deuteronomy chapter 6. It begins, the first line, Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, since I just taught about this last weekend, I have to point out, this is my favorite haiku. Right? 5 syllables, 7 syllables, 5 syllables. And as I taught last weekend, to be a real haiku, to be a mamash haiku, you have to have just a little twist at the end. Those last 5 syllables have to have a little something unexpected in them. So if you count them out, Shema Yisrael, that's 5. Adonai Eloheinu, there's your 7. And then the surprise, Adonai Echad, God is one. Right? If you'd never seen this line before, you wouldn't see that coming. So we say Shema Yisrael, listen up, Israel. I think my modern translation, I had to leave one word in Hebrew to make it rhyme, but my modern Street English translation is, Yo, y'all, Yah is God and Yah is Echad. Where was I going with that? I don't know. That was a detour. Shema, listen up, Israel. And I find it curious that we already did the call to worship, right? The call to worship was a couple of prayers ago, and now we're saying listen. Wouldn't it make more sense to say listen up, Israel, and then have the call to worship? I don't know why it is, except maybe history, that this was already part of the service. It is, after all, very old. It's Torah. But before we had the stuff that came before Baruch Hu, and we needed that call to worship. I don't know. But what is curious, if you go on right after Shema, we have the Ve'ahavta, which the first line says, you shall love, you should love Adonai your God with all your heart. This prayer is essentially commanding us to love God. How can it do that? How can you say you have to love somebody? Or you have to love God? I think we get a clue in the text that came right before Shema. And we have exactly the same thing that happens on Shabbat morning. It's a different prayer, but it's about the same thing. It's a prayer about God's love for us. And it is followed immediately in both cases by Ve'ahavta, which is a prayer about our love for God. And these two units of prayer taken together describe our relationship with God as we head into the rest of the service. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto Leolam Va'ed. Ya la la ya la 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 la. ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך. לה לה יה לה 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 והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבבך. לה 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 ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובליל לכתך בדרך, ושוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם נאות על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך, על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך. לה 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 למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם.
Now we invite Robin Valentine to share the preamble, the liturgy leading up to the Micha Mocha.
Emet ve'emunah. All this we hold to be true and trustworthy for us. You alone are our God, and we, Israel, your people. You are our sovereign and Savior, who delivers us from oppressors' hands and saves us from tyrants' fists. Your work wonders without number, marvels beyond count. You give us life and steady our footsteps. You perform miracles for us before Pharaoh, signs and wonders in the lands of Egyptians. You led your people Israel from their midst to freedom for all time. When your children witnessed your dominance, they praised your name in gratitude, and they accepted your sovereignty. Moses, Miriam, and all Israel sang to you together, lifting their voices joyously.
כמוך באלים אדוני, מי כמוך נטע בקודש, תורת תהילות תוסיף אלה, תורת תהילות תוסיף אלה. מלכותך ראו בניך, בוקע ים לפני משה ומרים, זה לי ענו ואמרו, זה לי ענו ואמרו, ימלוך לעולם ועד, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד. לה 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 לה, יא לה 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 לה, יא לה 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 לה, יא לה 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 יא לה לה לה. Times I lay under the moon and I thank God I'm breathing, and then I pray, don't take me soon, 'cause I am here for a reason. In my tears I drown, but I never let it get me down. So when negativity surrounds, I know someday I'll turn around, because all my life I've been waiting for, I've been praying for the people to say that we don't want to fight no more, there'll be no more wars, our children will play one day, one day, one day, one day, one day, one day. Ashkiveinu Adonai Eloheinu Lishalom, Behamidenu Shomrei.
just finished the section of the service that begins with Baruch Hu and ends with Hashkivenu most nights. And we start to head into a different section of our service, which has numerous names. The most probably common name that you'll find is the Amidah, which means standing. When we consider this the standing section of our service, when we're in the sanctuary, we ask everyone to please rise, and we yet again face east. And we know that a prayer takes, it has a particular significance when we're asked to stand up. The same is true when we hear the 10 Commandments. There are certain texts in Jewish tradition that we want to be sort of called to attention in this way, and that the choreography mirrors the import of what we're saying. Another name for this section of the service is Hatfilah, meaning the prayer. And we know that there's more than just one prayer in this section, and there's more than just this section in the service, but this is considered to be the spiritual climax of the service, one of the most pivotal moments, and we'll explain why in just a moment. And then another name for it, at least when it's not Shabbat, is Shmona Esrei, which literally means 18 and refers to the 18, just kidding, 19 blessings that you would recite at this point in the service during a weekday. And you'll often hear me talk about that on Shabbat, we give God a break, because this is the part of the service where we ask of God things. And on a weekday, we have a lot of things to ask of God. Why are you wondering that we call it the 18, but it's really the 19? We've been trying to tease that apart for the last hundreds of years. But our understanding is that originally it was 18 blessings, which makes sense. We like that number in Jewish tradition, 18 standing for Chaim, meaning life. And then at one point, one prayer was split, and then we ended up with 19, a couple of different working theories. But needless to say, let's take a look at what those 19 blessings look like on your typical weekday service. So Cantor, next slide, please. Okay, so we have 19 with very specific scripted themes that in the early days of our worship services, the words of the prayers were actually not set in the same way that they are for us today, especially not for this section of the service. And you would want to appoint someone who had the knowledge and ability to recite a prayer that was from their heart that would be on each of these 19 themes. And what I did for you was bold the 6 that carry over into Shabbat. So out of the 19, there are 6 that we keep true for Shabbat, that, God doesn't get a total rest from us. We want to remind God of the commitment God made to our ancestors, nudging God a little bit that don't forget us in either. That we want to remember God's power, that God has the ability to instill life. And we hope that God will remember to give us some of that life. And we want to also acknowledge God's great name, which was the purpose of ancient Israelite religion, was to shout God's name from the rooftops and to honor God's name. And then we skip all that stuff in the middle, asking God for things like wisdom and good crops and righteous action and justice, much of what keeps us busy most days. And instead, we have one blessing for all of those intermediary ones that say that acknowledging the holiness of this day, this special day of Shabbat. And so that's what we get instead on Shabbat. And what's really nice is when we celebrate Shabbat on the 7th day of the week, we only have 7 blessings in this chunk of our service. And then we bring it back to the end with the 3 that would be our usual closer, thanking God or acknowledging God or reminding ourselves that we need to be worshiping God for our avodah prayer. What once was sacrifices offered at the temple in Jerusalem, we now offer the words of our hearts and souls, our prayers. We want to remember to say thank you to God. Thank you for all the blessings in our lives. The rabbis understood that when the Messiah comes and the world is a perfect place, all of the sacrifices that were going on in the temple, they would all be able to be chucked into the garbage except for one. And that's the blessing for Thanksgiving, that we should never stop saying thank you for all the good things in our lives. And then the last theme, peace, shalom, could also think of it as wholeness, that we often return to this centering theme in our worship, because we're going to see that again later on in our service. So as we enter the Amidah, the Tefillah, these core prayers in our service tonight. Let us channel our ancestors. Let us reflect on God's power. Let us think about God's name and how we can uphold and honor and sanctify that, how we want to worship God, how we want to say thank you for all the good things in our lives, and how we can find inner shalom or peace.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu v'Elohei Avotenu v'Imotenu Elohei Avraham Elohei Yitzchak v'Elohei Yaakov Elohei Sarah Elohei Rivka Elohei Rachel v'Elohei Leah Ha'el Hagadol Hagibor v'Hanora El Elyon Gomel Chasadim Tovim v'Konei Hakol וזוכר חסדי אבות ואמהות, ומביא גאולה לבני בניהם, למען שמו באהבה. מלך חוזר ומושיע ומגן, ברוך אתה אדוני, מגן אברהם ועזרת שרה. אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני, מחיי הכל אתה רב להושיע. משיב הרוח ומוריד הגשם, מכלכל חיים בחסד, מחיי הכל ברחמים רבים, סומך נופלים ורופא חולים, ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו לשני עפר, מי כמוך בעל גבורות, ומדומה לך, מלך ממית ומחיה ומצמיח ישועה ונאמן אתה להחיות הכל. ברוך אתה אדוני מחיה הכל. אתה קדוש ושמך קדוש וקדושים בכל יום יהללוך סלה. ברוך אתה אדוני האל הקדוש.
Now we turn to our version of the Hoda'ah prayer, our blessing for gratitude and thanks. And if there's anything you would like to share with our community tonight that you are particularly thankful for, I invite you to type in the chat box so we can express our gratitude with you. Spring is coming. I am definitely grateful for more sunshine later in the day, buds peeping out. More vaccines and more arms. Any birthdays, anniversaries? Oh, thank you, Susan. Oh, celebrating family birthdays, quick visit from family. Successful surgery. So let's keep these blessings coming as we turn to our words of gratitude.
Modim anachnu lach, modim anachnu lach. רב על ישראל עמך תשים לעולם. שלום רב על ישראל עמך תשים לעולם. כי אתה הוא מלך אדון לכל השלום. כי אתה הוא מלך אדון לכל השלום. שלום רב על ישראל עמך תשים לעולם. שלום רב על ישראל עמך תשים לעולם. בטוב בעיניך לברך את עמך ישראל בכל עת ובכל שעה בשלומך. שלום רב על ישראל עמך תשים לעולם. שלום רב על ישראל עמך תשים לעולם. ברוך אתה אדוני המברך את עמו ישראל השלום. שלום רב על ישראל עמך תשים לעולם. שלום רב על ישראל עמך תשים לעולם. תשים לעולם. תשים לעולם.
Because sometimes the words that our ancestors passed down to us or the words of our prayer book are just not enough. We take a few moments for silent prayer so that we have some unscripted time to acknowledge all of the hopes and dreams that we carry with us. We'll come back together in just a moment.
שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן. הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל אמן. עושה שלום שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל אמן.
Originally, our next prayer, the Mishaberach, the prayer for healing, the prayer that invokes our ancestors' names, asking God to remember all those in our lives in need of healing, just as God remembered all those who came before us. This prayer used to be reserved for Saturday mornings when the Torah scroll was open, for there was felt to be a strength garnered from our sacred scripture, that with the words of the Torah before us, maybe our prayers would be heard a little more closely and answered a little more quickly. But in our community, because many of us are more used to gathering on Friday nights, this is our big service of the week. And because this prayer is just so powerful for those of us who are saying it and all of those who know it's being said on their behalf, we've incorporated it into our Friday night service. So we want to imagine the Torah scroll open before us with those sacred teachings speaking out to us as we recite these names of loved ones who are in need of healing, and all the names that are being typed in the chat box who also could use this prayer. Rhoda Schwartz, Arlene Grable, Teddy Molaski, Nathan Hecker, William Jackie Sola, Steve Bizanoff, Marion Berman, Marvin and Ginny Gittleman, Betty Abramowitz, Bob Gast, Chaim Ben Esther, Elaine Berkowitz, Barbara Gladstone, Rosalie Krieger, the Aflalo Faye Urkel family, Louis Baskin, Sue Mahalko, Angelo Verzoni, Claire Munkachi, Marlena Elkin, Lisa Scher, Sheldon Kaplan, Arlene Mulry Pearl, Yisrael Binyamin, Jill Sava, Dorothy Chason, Toby Arias, Piper Fitzpatrick, Diane Walter, Erica Taylor, Tzipora Bat Shoshana, Sandra Schachter, Ellen Weisberg and the Evans family, Stanton Singer, Bernard Greenwald, Allison Schaffman, Flood, Gail Malter, Ed Glazer, Avram Glazer, Iris Horowitz, and Ross Elkin. For all those and many more in need of healing and wholeness, we join together in this Mishaberach.
Mishaberach Avotenu, Avraham, Yitzchak veYaakov. Mishaberach Imotenu, Sarah, Rivka, Leah, Rachel. May the one who blessed our mothers, may the one who blessed our fathers, hear our prayer, hear our prayer, hear our prayer, hear our prayer, and bless us as well. Bless us with the power of your healing. Bless us with the power of your hope. May our hearts be filled with understanding and strengthened by the power of your love. Mishaberach Avotenu, Avraham, Yitzchak veYaakov. Mishaberach Imotenu, Sarah, Rivka, Leah, Rachel. May the one who blessed our mothers, may the one who blessed our fathers, hear our prayer, hear our prayer, hear our prayer, hear our prayer, and bless us as well. The end is near. Actually, the end of the service is near. We're coming up on the prayer that officially marks kind of the end of the, the core part of the service. And there's another act of bowing here, which again, if you understand the ceremonies around royalty, and I guess, between The Crown and Game of Thrones and all the other TV shows, maybe we do have an inkling of what it looks like. And the Baruch Hu was our bowing in ceremony. When the first time we approach the royalty and we bow. And the same thing happens at the end of the service. The Aleinu is our bowing out ceremony. So we're leaving the presence of royalty, so we bow once again. I do want to show you, because you probably have noticed that we have a couple of different texts floating around for Aleinu. What we have here in front of us is the older, more traditional text of the Aleinu. And if you look in the column on the left, it begins, Aleinu l'shabech la'adon hakol. It's on us to praise the sovereign of the universe, to proclaim the greatness of the Creator who has not made us like other nations, nor placed us like the families of the earth, who has made our portion, not made our portion like theirs, our destiny, nor our destiny like all of them. So I noticed two things here. The thing that the early Reform movement had an issue with is that it's very particularist. It's all about us and them. The other thing, if you look at it carefully, this bit of text here doesn't really seem to fit very well with the text that comes before it. Right? We're praising the God of all the universe and proclaim the greatness of the Creator, and then it's all about us. And what's interesting is, if you look at the newer version, the version that's in Mishkan Tfilah, you have the same opening, but then, who spread out the heavens and established the earth, whose glory is revealed in the heavens above, and whose greatness is manifest throughout the world. You are our God, there is none else. There are two cool things about this version. First of all, it is also very traditional. Shehu Notei Shamayim, the text that feels new, it's just from a little bit later in the Aleinu. And you might know it by a different tune. Shehu Notei Shamayim v'yosed haaretz u'moshav yikaro b'shamayim mimal. It's the same text, just moved a little bit earlier in the Aleinu, and it fits perfectly. If you look at the English, it fits perfectly with what came before. Right? We're going to praise the sovereign of the universe and proclaim the greatness of the Creator, who spread out the heavens and established the earth, whose glory is revealed in the heavens above, and whose greatness is manifest throughout the world. You are our God, there is none else. So we'll continue with the newer version, which is actually an old version, just a newer combination of the pieces. Aleinu leshabeach ladon hakol, latet gedola liyotzer bereshit, shehu notei shamayim v'yosed haaretz, u'moshav yikaro b'shamayim mima'al, u'shchinatu zo begavhei meromim, hu Eloheinu ein od, v'anachnu korim, u'mishtachavim u'modim, lifnei melech malchei hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. V'ne'emar v'haya Adonai lemelech al kol haaretz bayom hahu yeh Adonai echad u'shemo echad.
So we've reached the Kaddish that is most familiar, but we'll talk about that in just a moment. The word Kaddish is related to the Hebrew word Kadosh, meaning holy. And I'm making a distinction between the Kaddish and Hebrew because this prayer is not like many of the other prayers in our prayer book. This prayer was written in Aramaic, not the language of the Torah, not the language of the Bible, except for one book, the latest book, but in the language that we spoke 2,000 years ago, the language that was our legal language, the language of a traditional ketubah or a get. And so it sounds a little bit different. For our B'nai Mitzvah students, sometimes it takes a little longer to learn how to get the words out because it's a different flow than the Hebrew we are used to. And in a traditional service, a service that you'd see in an observant community, you're going to hear multiple Kaddishes throughout the service. One of the ones that we're most familiar with is the Chatzi Kaddish, Yitkara Shemei Rabbah, which literally means the half Kaddish. It is the shortest version of all. And sometimes in another service, you might come across the Kaddish Shalem, mostly familiar with a few extra lines, known as the full Kaddish. The half Kaddish is not actually half of the full Kaddish, just so everyone's aware. Sometimes we also have the Kaddish de Rabbanan. So if you do some learning as part of a service, you can close out that learning of Torah with the teacher's Kaddish, and which has a line about teachers and students and this beautiful learning that is that happens between the two of them, and that sometimes the roles can get reversed. But we close out our service every time, definitely in our community, with Kaddish Yatom, which actually means the orphan's Kaddish. The original intent of this prayer was for those who had lost a father. In the ancient world, in the Jewish tradition, an orphan was really one who had lost a father. So you could still actually have your mother and be considered a Yatom, an orphan in tradition, because you had lost the breadwinner in the ancient Israelite community, that it was a different economic system to have lost your father. And so hence born the tradition that a son would say mourner's Kaddish on behalf of a father who had passed. But over time, we realized that wasn't enough. And that Kaddish, the mourner's Kaddish, expanded to include both parents, to include siblings, spouses, and what used to be very common in our community until the modern era, but now is such an anathema to us. God forbid if you should lose a child. And while you might think that the Kaddish could speak of death, since we so often connect that prayer with the mourning of a loved one, it actually only speaks of life and peace, and its main purpose is to praise God. And Sherry's reminding us that in other kinds of services, it's used as punctuation, that we have so many different kinds of Kaddish because every now and then we intersperse one throughout the service is a cue that we're switching from one section of the liturgy to another. But I've learned that originally Kaddish was designated for only one soul. You couldn't recite Kaddish for more than one person. So the only way to be able to have a Kaddish for multiple individuals was to insert it more frequently into the service. And one of the things our Reform ancestors was said, you know what? It's mainly the same words over and over again. We're going to truncate it. We're going to reduce it to maybe the Hatzi Kaddish and the mourner's Kaddish, but that we're going to make it an inclusive prayer. And that we're going to say it in memory of all those we have lost. And we're going to do it together as a community. And so as we prepare for the words of Kaddish Yatom, we want to name Betty Lyons, a family friend of Pamela Adler and Jeff Frohl, who died this week. We want to remember the following members of our community who are in the period of Shloshim, the first 30 days of mourning. Maddie Neufeld, who is mourning the loss of her mother, Joan Diamond Carter. Michael and Mara Fox, mourning the loss of his grandmother, Francine Schneider. Susan Burchad, mourning the loss of her husband, Ed. Fiona Platten, mourning the loss of her mother, Nessa Holmes. Samantha Blatt and her mother, Jean Nitzberg, who are mourning the loss of Samantha's father, Gary Blatt. And remember the following yard sites, the passing of these loved ones, the anniversary of their passing that fell in this week that just passed. Anne Francis Konevsky, Ruth Berman, Jeanette Bloom, Ilsa Shapira, Robert Saltzman, Etta Gordon, Adele Feldstein, Eva Cohen, Eric Friedman, Melvin Seifer, Douglas Gerhardt, Arnie Goldstein, Joseph Rindler, Herman Harris, Francis Hochberg, Sid Hoffing, Evelyn Kurinsky, Ida Kaplowitz, Theodore Linton, Norma Glassman, Lou Hamowitz, Victoria Gruber, Zelig Parab, Liza Parab, Sophie Rackbuck, Bertram Zeldin, Robert Bubba Stein, Dorothy Greenbaum, Grace Swartz Arano, Rose Clara Stoller, Jack Horowitz, Joseph Nathanson, Hyman Sachs, Nathan Schwartz, Herbert Weiss, Bernard Friedman, Liba Miller, Florence Gerson, Flora Maria Safe, Gertrude Durlacher, Blossom Katz Malik, Jack Kossower, Harriet Lesney, William Karp, Gertrude Berkowitz, Anita Sheff, Stanley Weinstein. And we want to also acknowledge the lives that were lost senselessly due to the shootings in Atlanta this week. We turn as one community to the words of Kaddish Yatom, the mourner for orphans and for all those in mourning. Yit Gadal v'yit Kadash Shemei Rabbah, v'yalma divra chirutei v'yamlich malchutei, v'chayecho uvyomecho, v'chaye dechol Beit Yisrael, ba'agala uvizman kariv v'yimru amen. Yehei Shmei Rabbah mevarach le'alam ul'amei almaya, Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh, v'yithadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shemei dekudisha brichu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata. Tushbechata v'nechemata za'amiran b'yalma v'imru amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya v'chayim alenu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav. Hu ya'aseh shalom alenu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. May the one who creates harmony on high bring peace to us and to all Israel, to which we say, Amen. We'll now ask Vivian Newmark to share a few announcements with us.
Unmute. Thank you. Hello, my name is Vivian Newmark. On behalf of the Board of Directors of Congregation Beth Chaim, thank you for joining us tonight for our Learning Shabbat service. And thank the Rabbi and Cantor for making it a very enjoyable evening. On Saturday, our weekly Torah study meets at 8:45 a.m. At 9 a.m., the current B'nai Mitzvah family class will meet. Mazal Tov to William Frohl and his family, as he is called to the Torah at 10:30 a.m. to become one of Beth Chaim's B'nai Mitzvah. It is another busy week at Congregation Beth Chaim. Learning in the Lot for religious school will meet Sunday at 9 a.m., followed by Zoom school at 11 a.m. Log on with our religious school for an all-star musical Passover Seder with Rick Recht and friends at 11:30 a.m. Also on Sunday, the board meets at 10:30 a.m., followed by men's club at 12 p.m. On Tuesday at 7:30 p.m., we will have a book discussion on A Land Without Borders by Nir Baram. On Wednesday evening, Zoom Religious School will meet at 4:30 p.m. and 7 p.m. The Sisterhood Board meeting will begin at 7 p.m. The Reopening Task Force will meet at 8:30 p.m. On Thursday, join Ann Berman Waldorf for Nasha Knowledge at 12:30 p.m. Next Friday, our Shabbat service will begin at 8 p.m. Passover begins next Saturday evening. Join us for a second night Seder on Sunday, March 28th at 5 p.m. Pick up your Passover bags from the membership committee on Sunday, 1 through 3 p.m., and on Tuesday and Wednesday, 10 through 2 p.m. We are still looking for sponsors for journal ads and silent auction items for our senior rabbi installation weekend, April 23rd through 25th. For details, see bethchaim.betterworld.org. Visit our website, bethchaim.org, for more details about upcoming events. Thank you, as always, for being a valued member of our community, and Shabbat Shalom.
Hey.
And Sherry let us know that Nefesh Mountain will be joining Rick Recht on Sunday. So if you'd like a teaser for the installation concert, come and zoom on Sunday midday.
All right, so our Passover is getting wrecked this year. Roma. but I'm not the only one. Maybe someday you will join us, and the world will be as one.
So for everyone who has a challah close by or a cookie or your personal oneg, grab a nash and we'll recite Hamotzi together.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Amen.
Amen. And we'll close out with a benediction, not in the original prayer book, but a nice cap on our time together, words of intention, and hopefully inspiration as we go into Shabbat. So I want to say thank you for this learning that we've done together tonight. Thank you for accompanying us on this journey through our prayer book, a deep dive into our prayers. If you liked what you experienced tonight, let's talk about what we want to do for our next learner service. And may we always go from strength to strength.
Yivarechecha Adonai v'yishmarecha.
May God bless us and protect us.
Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'chuneka.
May God's light shine upon us, and may God be gracious to us.
Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom.
May we always feel that God's presence is near, and may we be blessed with the greatest gift of all, the gift of peace.
Amen.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom. Shabbat shalom, everybody.
Shabbat shalom. Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you, Cantor.
Take care, everybody.
Shabbat shalom.
Fantastic service.
Shabbat shalom, everyone.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you, Tanner.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat.
Thank you, Rabbi Cantor.
Drive home safely, everyone.
Safe travels.
Nice.
Not yet.
Yes. Thank you.
See you in the morning.
Shabbat shalom, everyone. Take care.
Shabbat shalom.
What? What do you say? She said, see you in the morning.
She said Bill Newmark. See you in the morning. That's what she said.
The Torah study, folks.
The Torah study.
See you tomorrow.
Hey, Mom.
Good night,
Shabbat shalom.
Alisa. Lila
Shabbat
Tov.
shalom. Beautiful service.
Glad you enjoyed it. Be well, Gail.
You too.
Take care, Barbara. Oh, there you are. See you, Laura.